Hi everyone, so today I'm talking about a basic concept on the standardized test that you have to feel comfortable with. And that is an Algebra 2 topic that you've learned rational equations and expressions, but today I'm going to be just talking about rational equations. So a rational equation is an equation in which you have a fraction in the equation, but the variable is actually in the denominator. The variable is in the denominator. And rational equations have some things, they have some limits that we have to consider. Because if it has a fraction, if it's a fraction, like this is a rational equation. There's a variable with in the denominator of a fraction. Then I have some restrictions on that variable. We call that the domain restrictions, okay? So we have to think about domain restrictions. So before I even start to even think about solving a problem, I'm going to write those restrictions down. That means that x cannot be this as an answer because it would make the denominator 0. And we know that we can never have a 0 in the denominator because that produces an undefined value for ourselves. So looking right here, I see that if x were 0, it would give me a 0 in the denominator. So x cannot be 0. All right, and here in this equation, x can't be 3 because if it were 3, it would give me a 0 in the denominator. All right, so that's important. I now have my domain restrictions. So if this is a multiple choice question like the one I'm giving you, I already know that x can't be 0 and x cannot be 3. So I'm going to throw out b and d because there's a 3 in it. Now, I could choose on a standardized test to solve this equation by clearing the fractions and solving the rational expression. But this is a great example of where plugging in answers is valuable. Plugging in answers is valuable. Now, I want to choose wisely. Both of my answers have a 1 in them. So if I choose 1 and it works, that's not going to help me in any way. So I decided I'm going to go to C and check 2. I'm going to plug in 2 because if 2 doesn't work, right, then I know that that's not my answer and I can pick A. All right, so I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to plug it into the equation. So 2 minus 2 over 2 minus 3 equals 1 over 2 plus 1 all over 2 minus 3. All right, so 2 minus 2 on this side gives me 0 over negative 1, which I know if 0 is in the numerator, it gives me 0. And then I've got 1/2. And then 1 all over negative 1 gives me negative 1. So I get 0 equals negative 1/2, which is not true. That is not a true equation. So I can throw out C and my answer would be A. Okay, so this is a really great example of a plug-in question that deals with rational equations. But what did you learn most important? Before you even start the problem, you need to write down your domain restrictions and then eliminate based on that. Okay, but now let's talk about how we would solve this same equation. Okay, so let me copy it. Let's talk about if we would solve this equation. So say it was a free response question. Okay, so if it were a free response question, then I'd have to deal with what I normally do on these problems. So I have to multiply the entire equation by the LCD, the lowest common denominator, which is x times x minus 3. So I'm going to multiply this every term of the equation by that. Okay? So x times x minus 3 and x times x minus 3 and x times x minus 3. Now, if you don't have to write it, that's just up to you. So the x minus 3's cancel in the first one, and I'm left with x times x minus 2. In the second one, the x's cancel, and I'm left with x minus 3. In the third one, the x minus 3's cancel, and I'm left with x. Okay, so I've got some work to do now. So first I need to distribute my x, and I'm going to get x squared minus 2x equals, I'm going to simplify by combining the like terms, 2x minus 3. All right, now I notice it's a quadratic equation because that highest exponent's a 2, so I'm going to get it set equal to 0 and try to solve by factoring. So I'm going to subtract 2x, and I'm going to subtract 3 to the other side, and I'm going to get x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. All right, I'm going to try and factor, and I get x minus 3 x plus 1. Did I do something wrong here? Because I should add 3 right here. I caught myself. Should have added 3 right there. Okay, so that means that would be x minus 3, x minus 1 equals 0. That just took me a second. I caught myself, right, because it didn't factor properly for myself. Then I use the zero product property to set each of the terms equal to 0, and I get x equals 3 and x equals 1. Now, here's the problem. If I hadn't written down my domain restrictions of x can't equal 0 and x equals 3, in that last question, I would have gotten it wrong because I would have picked D. And you have to consider domain restrictions in rational equations. Absolutely the most important part, and what's going to get you tripped up on the SAT. So hopefully that was a good kind of quick reminder of rational equations and how to handle them on a standardized test. Have a great day.